Bet Sharukkin, The Son of Perdition, by Alan Bonk. Chapter 6. Nineveh, Assyria's New Capital. Just days after the destruction of Damascus, Paul received a summons from Asher that he was to appear before him at the top node of the tree of life. Paul complied. Asher began, Sharukkin Bani Paul, the time is now right. Go to Baghdad and talk to the Prime Minister of Iraq. He will be expecting you. You are to demand that the Assyrians receive their homeland and full autonomy. You will require all of Bet-Nahrin, the land of Nineveh, and all the land west to Urmia. This will include Mosul and Arbel. The old city of Nineveh will be your new capital. Go into the old walls and rebuild it. Might the Iraqi government find this too bold, Father? Asked Paul. Asher shouted at Paul, No! They fear a civil war, like Syria's. Never question me again. Do it now. As you command, Paul muttered. 3 months later, in an Assyrian Union meeting, in a hotel in Mosul, only a small distance from the old city walls of Nineveh, Paul was at the epicenter of a lively celebration. Paul raised a glass of arak in front of a room full of Assyrian zealots. Paul toasted, Gentlemen, I have fought and clawed and sacrificed for all of Assyria, and now it has all led up to this. We will move into our new nation in Iraq and begin to set up government in Nineveh. Cheers all around. Almost immediately, money and resources began to flow into Paul and his new government. Some of it was from Assyrians around the world, supporting the new Assyria, but most of it was coming from spiritual blackmail by Asher and his minions. They were pressuring individuals, corporations, and even governments all over the world, which had received assets or favors from Asher over the years. It seems the day of reckoning has come. Money was initially spent on securing the oil fields within the land. Oil alone could fund a new startup government. But Paul was also flowing money back to the people themselves. Not only building funds or no taxes, but also direct personal wealth. His policy was unheard of in the Middle East. Paul was even asked by the Iranians to lead Iran after their destruction. The old Islamic Republic had been an utter failure economically. The people desperately needed relief. Paul was instantly, wildly popular in Iraq and Iran. Paul, the little Assyrian boy from Urmia, has become the leader of Assyria, northern Iraq, and Iran. The celebration continued. Paul's associates all joined in singing the Assyrian national anthem. Paul and Father Ibrahim stepped away and started a private conversation. Paul began, Father, I expected that there would be a certain level of satisfaction in my accomplishments, but I have come to realize that Asher wants more from me, more than just an Assyrian national leader. Father Ibrahim initially looked pleased and asked, well, perhaps an Assyrian empire. Paul replied with false surprise. Now, that's a very interesting idea. It's clear that Paul had given it a lot of thought. Father Ibrahim showed a look of concern. Would this empire have a place for me? Yes, of course. Right with me, up front and center. In fact, you must promise to stay and counsel me all the way. Paul continued, This is all very good news to me. I still feel strong and healthy, Father. I want greater things. My powers and ambitions are stronger than ever before. I feel unstoppable, Paul marveled. 4 months later, Paul was now working hard. He shared time between his Mosul and Nineveh office, his prime minister's office in Iran, but his pleasure was in Nineveh. The old city of Nineveh was literally inside of the eastern portion of the modern city of Mosul. While the city of Mosul was nearly razed to the ground by ISIS, it is now being rebuilt by a massive international effort. Paul was concentrating on Nineveh. He wanted to make it his Assyrian government citadel. The ruins that were called Nineveh were only being used for agricultural purposes. Paul received some pushback from the archaeological world for building on top of the old city, but Paul could not be swayed. Paul, in a speech, made a case. Israel uses the old city of Jerusalem. Rome is still used by the Italians. And the walled city of York is still used by the English. Why can't the Assyrians rebuild Nineveh? We, as Assyrians, are not looking to the past for our focus, but to the future. We will, of course, respect what we find and preserve it, but not in the British Museum or Chicago. Now, it will stay at home. By the time Paul was through with his speech, he wagged his finger at the camera. The old Nineveh was nearly 2 miles square. It was still enclosed by walls and gates. The old city gates were gone, but Paul rebuilt the gate structure and hanged new, modern security gates. The old walls were not all vertical. Some areas were reduced to rounded mud ramparts. But Paul was reinforcing all the existing stone and brick structures and then added modern steel fencing and shields on top. This included new military guard structures and walkways for troop movements. He was also placing steel buildings inside the city to house the new government and garrison the fledgling Assyrian military. These buildings were temporary and will be quickly upgraded as soon as time allows. A water plant, a power plant were quickly brought online. He also rebuilt the ancient tower located at the city center. End of chapter 6.